Hello, everyone. It says we are live and recording. Thank you so much for joining. Everyone, my name is Elizabeth Ottenfeld. I work on the partnerships team here at Pavilion, and I'm thrilled today with the conversation we've got in line for you all. I am joined with my lovely speakers on the screen, but before we get started, I would love to introduce our host. We have Aaron Landgraf. He's the head of marketing at Synchrony. He's going to be pulling the ropes, running the show today, asking our questions, and kicking things off. So, Aaron, if you'd like to kick it away, let's have it off.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you to Pavilion for allowing us to, again, have a bit of a provocative dialogue within the Pavilion community today around data and how, the single source of truth strategy, which we've been talking about now as an industry for the better part of a decade, if not a little bit longer, is not delivering on, the promises that have been pitched by vendors, and how we can take a slightly different approach to get to a much different set of outcomes. I am joined today by two rockstar revenue operations professionals, Sam Boley, the Senior Director of Revenue Operations at Metadata, and Ryan Milligan, the Senior Director of Revenue Operations at QuotaPath. And with that, I will allow Sam to introduce himself. So Sam, take it away.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Yes, I'm Sam Boley. I'm with Metadata. I've been there since June. I've been in sales ops, rev ops since 2009. And Metadata is a marketing technology platform that is acting as the operating system to help automate repetitive tasks for B2B marketers so that they can focus on cool things like strategy and content and revenue.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. And Sam is also a very, very valuable Synchrony customer, not only because he's helping us understand how a platform like ours can create outsized value, but because he's also extremely direct and provides valuable feedback both to me as a marketer and to our product organization that's making us better. So again, thank you, Sam, for all the value you bring to our organization. Ryan, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Milligan, Senior Director of RevOps here at QuotaPath. I've been here for about 6 months now and am actively working on standing up our data practice from a bit of scratch. So I'm definitely excited for this conversation to share where we are on our journey. I've had a roundabout journey to RevOps, starting in data science, then marketing and marketing ops. And so I've worked with a bunch of different types of data in the distributed source of truth kind of space. And QuotaPath is a commission tracking software built for RevOps and finance and sales teams to give reps visibility into their quota and attainment and calculate commissions effectively.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ryan, again, so much. For those of you who aren't familiar with Synchrony, just a quick infomercial. So we're a full stack data automation platform, and what we allow customers to do is align data across the tech stack, analyze that data to identify both data integrity, data fitness, as well as usability in the context of a revenue command center, and then activate that data by getting it to that data and those insights by getting it to the people and systems that need it, right? And so much of the conversation today will anchor on the primary pillar of, again, the Synchrony platform, which is getting your data and ultimately your business aligned. So we will start with Ryan. Ryan, do you have a single source of truth today inside of QuotaPath?
Thankfully, well, I mean, I guess the question opens to no. We have definitely a distributed source of truth here. I think that has been something we've been working on pretty intentionally over the last year. Historically, the thought was your CRM is your single source of truth. Dump your financial data, dump your product usage data, dump your product workspace data all into one place. And we've definitely done some of that in the past. I think the challenge there is you really have different teams, especially where I see a lot of this is marketing and sales, operating in different systems and marketing operations platforms versus sales platforms that both need to have access to the same amount of data and also need to be able to act in those platforms effectively towards joint goals. I talk a lot about the importance of having your marketing and sales teams have the same goals and drive towards those goals together, and having actionable data in the places that they're acting on a day-to-day basis is just table stakes for that. So I would say we are a reformed single source of truth company.
Okay.
That's how it goes in.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. Sam, what about you? Where do you line up on your single source of truth?
A little bit different than Ryan. I will say that we do use Salesforce as the single source of truth, and marketing, product usage, all of that data flows into Salesforce, and we create actionable intelligence based off of that data, and then we surface it to the right people at the right time using Salesforce data. If it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen.
Interesting. And how did you, well, you've been at Metadata for a little over a year now, right? Like, why did you decide on CRM as, you know, the gold standard for where you're going to keep this trusted actionable data?
I wouldn't say that Salesforce is the gold standard for where you keep your data, but it is the one that we had purchased, right?
Okay.
And when I joined Metadata about a year ago, you know, we're employee, you know, it was Series A company at the time, less than 50 employees or right around 50 employees. It's easy to use Salesforce as your single source of truth in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
If we were a 500 employee company and globally distributed with, you know, invoicing in different currencies and revenue recognition in different situations, I don't think my answer would be the same. But given the constraints of the system that I had to build around at the time, and it works, it's good enough to allow the business to make cogent decisions and actionable insights.
Okay, interesting. And so, Ryan, you started going down this path of talking about goals, shared metrics, right? Like, when you think about as an experienced operations leader, the struggles that organizations have around getting to trusted, accurate data that's shared across teams, right? Like, what are the dimensions of that struggle? Where do you focus your time? Like, when you came into QuotaPath, where do you focus your time on solving this problem?
Yeah, so I think we are in hyper growth mode at the top of our funnel. So we're in new logo acquisition hyper growth mode right now. So a lot of my action and intent from a data cleanliness and preparation and insight perspective has been at the top of the funnel, really aligning our marketing and sales teams towards common goals. And so that's where I've been spending a lot of my time. It's having our marketing team have the data they need in HubSpot from Salesforce about the effectiveness of different email automation campaigns they're running, or the effectiveness of different plays they're running into HubSpot where they're mainly operating, versus having our sales team in Salesforce have a lot of the information from campaigns that people are clicking on, information that they have, what they're doing and how they're interacting, to better inform prospecting to those MQLs. I mean, I think historically, which I love the change in thinking, a lot of the problem we've seen historically is that marketing brings a lead in from a webinar. They're great, they're qualified, they're really interested in learning more. They throw them over the fence and say, so long. And your marketing team needs that feedback loop directly into the products they're working in. At the same time, the sales team needs to understand in the products that they are working in where this person came from, what they're interested in, so they can have a conversation that is more tailored to the needs of the prospect.
Yeah, makes sense. And Elizabeth, before I ask Sam the follow-on question here, do you mind pushing the next 2 poll questions, and we'll just report back on the results of the first. Actually looks like, you know, split on if you have a single source of truth, and sure enough, what we find, single source of truth often looks like, you know, CRM or a data warehouse. So consistency given or consistency with what we see in other conversations with other communities. Sam, you know, in a lot of our conversations, you have talked about the importance of, you know, speaking truth to power, being a bit, you even call yourself a bit of a data dictator or a data steward, right? Like when you got to Metadata, how did you get people to rally around a set of shared metrics, data, and standards that allowed you to, you know, get to the place that you are today, that you feel, you know, confident in your data?
Sure. So I'm blessed with a stellar leadership team that is data driven. CEO is, former CMO and software engineer. So like he gets data. VP of sales, head of marketing they're all aligned. Like it's all about bottom of funnel revenue. Everybody's marching to the same goals. So that was a blessing, from the outset, right? But then, you come in and Salesforce is dirty and, we don't really trust it that much. And it's like, well, it was very simple and to the direct. If you hired me to solve this problem, here is the problem, here is the solution. Now everybody kind of rally around this and get out of my way, right? And I did. We cleaned the data, we made changes, the forecast became accurate. The reporting in Salesforce became accurate. It matched with external financials that were being done in Google Sheets or whatever. And so everyone could see that, I didn't bullshit my way through this, and now it works. So we generated some quick wins, and by doing that, it gives you a lot of credibility to keep marching forward. But to your point, it's like, I am very direct. I've kind of been there, done that in a number of startups, and so I'm okay with saying, you hired me to solve this problem. Here's how we're going to solve it. Let's get to work.
I mean, let's talk about not just the quick wins, but also, the types of impact you've been able to have on, the go-to-market strategy fundamentally, right? Like once you had those quick wins in place and you got people to see the value of trusted, accurate data being available, at least to the people that needed it, right? You have a great example around, the customer health score and how you've been able to customer health index and how you've been able to optimize that in a lot of different ways. If you wouldn't mind sharing, that'd be great.
Sure. And this is my Syncery plug. I use Syncery for this exact solution. So the metadata platform, it helps you to automate campaigns and experiments across social media marketing and Google Analytics or Google search. And we have a lot of usage data, We know how many experiments our customers are creating and how many campaigns they're running and how many audiences they're building. And so all of this data was living external to Salesforce. We would occasionally publish dashboards that the CSMs could go look at on their own. And it was not being well utilized. So I took the data and built out Salesforce architecture and started using Syncery to pump that data into Salesforce. And we looked at the data and started to identify trends, because now that the data is in Salesforce, we could butt it up against opportunities and customers and see which of the customers that renewed and which of the customers that churned, what was their usage like. And we created a health score based off of actual product usage data instead of what was majority CSM sentiment. And it worked out really well. We started to use it to surface it to CSMs so that they could proactively get in front of customers that looked like they could potentially be churn risks, or proactively get in front of customers that looked like they were ready for upsell and cross-sell. And then we took that one step further and we backed the data up once again to, instead of looking at win rates for our ICP, we started to look at renewal and expansion rates, and that redefined our ICP a little bit. Instead of going after customers that were easy to win but hard to renew, we now go to look at who is the right customer profile that is likely to expand and renew. And it had staggering effects. In December and January, our lead volume went down dramatically, but our opportunity, the number of opportunities that we were creating through inbound remained constant, and the ASP went up. So it's like it was well worth the effort, and it all started because we took disparate data in another platform and we essentially unified it.
Sam, there's a few questions in the chat around your data architecture here, and just for this group's context, when we talk about aligning, analyzing, and activating data, often what a lot of go-to-market teams, specifically in the SaaS space, are laser focused on right now is product data, product usage data. So Sam, I don't know if you can see in the chat, but when you say you changed your SFDC architecture to take in usage data, what did that actually look like, and what were the types of data that you were considering, or at least?
Yeah, we created 2 custom objects in Salesforce that are children of, I mean, we're going to get really nerdy for a second, that are children of the account record. One of them is the usage month, and then one of them is usage child. And so you're allowed to have multiple instances of metadata if you're a customer. And so if you have multiple instances or just a single, those all go in as usage children, and those roll up to the usage month. And so we're tracking your product usage on a monthly snapshot so that we can see trending over time. So it is a couple of custom objects with a plethora of custom fields, and then we aggregate it so that we can do trend analysis.
I'm going to put a pin in that and circle back to it after a conversation with Ryan here, because I want to give Ryan some love and help him share some insights with this group. Ryan, when you think about like what you came into at QuotaPath and where you are today, what did that journey look like? And we talked a little bit about prioritization. Again, how did you think about establishing some quick wins to get the team aligned with your approach to thinking about data? And yeah, let's start there before we move on.
Yeah, so I'm a big SQL junkie. I love writing SQL. I think it's like a great power to have within an organization. And I showed up at QuotaPath on day one with no data warehouse, no ability to write SQL. Board decks were built off of basically CSV downloads from different sources, from Salesforce, from Stripe, and then just VLOOKUPs to build customer views. So priority number one for me was standing up a data warehouse ETL layer to pull data from all of our different systems, from Stripe, from Salesforce, from SalesLoft, from HubSpot, from our product into one place to be able to build some reporting, and then stand up mode from a BI data visualization perspective for us. So I liked Sam's point a lot. One of my first projects was building a customer health score in a similar way, a very lightweight view of customer health, which has been very helpful and actionable for our account manager teams as well. I think the other one, which was really around the sales and marketing alignment, was kind of a deeper view of our ICP and the right persona for us to be selling to. I think we had some anecdotal thoughts that we sell to people in RevOps, people in sales, people in finance for different use cases for commission tracking, and we analyzed all of this data and learned pretty quickly that while we had a high volume of deals selling to a sales leader, which is great for us, we actually had higher ASP from our RevOps and finance deals, which allowed us to broaden kind of the aperture of who we were talking to. We were pretty singularly focused on having a conversation with a sales leader, and those were some really quick wins. We are definitely very early on in our data journey. It's now we're at the warehouse data access point, and now we're getting the deluge of my team. Well, I'm kind of an analytics team of one, is getting the deluge of, I love all this data. Show me the CAC LTV payback of these different marketing channels and show me all these different things. And so one of the topics I'm excited to talk a little bit more about is how you make that transition from being almost a data resource, but then eventually becoming a data bottleneck or a data access bottleneck. And then how do you make your data more federated so the rest of the org can act on it effectively as well? And that's a transition that I've gone through in the past and am actively going through right now, which is a fun challenge for sure.
let's just keep this going. Yeah. So how are you thinking about your priorities for this next phase of growth now that you have a decent foundation in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think the next step for us is I consider myself a good SQL writer. I'm in no way kind of an analytics engineer in any sense. And so the first thing is really thinking about commonly identified and understood materialized views of our data. I've been kind of stringing some stuff together in the back end myself, and I'm excited to elevate to more materialized views of our data that I can actually arm other people in the organization to build dashboarding off of. That to me is the fundamental next step in our data journey, is empower the end user to build her own dashboards, build her own reporting. Whereas right now I'm building most of the dashboarding, and that is the main point, and something we're talking about the value of Synchrony, like that's clearly a value proposition that you all provide, which is exciting for sure.
Yeah, the other thing that we hear, and you are not at this stage yet, but a lot of organizations that go forward down this path of putting everything into a data warehouse, putting a useful model in front of that data warehouse so that people can self-serve on top of not only just trusted, accurate data, but also like consistent definitions of both data and metrics, right? Like you just talked about ARR, customer lifetime value, right? Churn, like all these things. If you're reporting in silos, tend to break down. So how do you think about, one, controlling for consistency in that regard, and two, how are you thinking about just like the drift that tends to occur when you're aggregating everything into a warehouse, but not necessarily at a point where you're pushing that back out to operational systems yet?
It definitely keeps me up at night. I mean, I think that, and I think the trade-off really is if you basically have data definition and dictionary prioritization versus speed of output. We at our stage have been much more focused on speed of output. I need to shift us organizationally to be thinking of, hey, let's make sure our data is in really good, clean shape. Let's make sure that everybody understands what this column means. And we ran into this problem at my last company where we had an analytics team of 4 or 5. We were further along in our data journey, but we hadn't done the work to prioritize the data dictionary, data understanding. And so what you had was people building reports off of variables they thought were one thing and they were a completely different thing. Active users, what is the common definition of active users or something like that. So I think it's going to require, it is either going to require us to do one of 3 things. It's slow down output to have data dictionary understanding, invest in more tooling to help with definitions more broadly, or continue the speed, but understand that we are probably going to run into some snags where somebody's building a report with a variable that they are not understanding exactly how that's calculated. And there's trade-offs to all of those, but it's definitely something I'm aware of for sure.
Yeah, for the audience, the origin story of Synchrony is just knowledge of the pain that surfaces when executives come to an executive meeting or to a board meeting and they're reporting on like the basic measures of the business, like number of customers that churned last quarter, what is our ARR, what are our bookings versus revenue, and that number is inconsistent based on where teams are reporting from. Right? Like the finance team might be reporting out of either a data warehouse or their own master spreadsheet versus what's in Salesforce versus what's in Marketo or HubSpot. So yeah, a lot of the value of our platform is just getting the tech stack aligned with consistent trusted data everywhere. Sam, I don't know if you can see this question, but Ray asks, so for those of us who have the RevOps responsibility but are not data gurus, I don't know if, Sam, you would describe yourself as a data guru, more of a data ninja. But how do you do this, right? If you're not, say, you don't have the skills to write a SQL query, right? How do you approach this problem?
It's a little tough, right? I'm not going to lie. I am good at Salesforce. I'm not good at SQL. I can't write SQL anything. But I am good at Salesforce reporting and Salesforce formula writing. So I think the honest answer that I would give is build your reporting structure where you're most comfortable in your accuracy, right? So if you're good at Excel and you'd much rather export the data into Excel and build it in a framework that it's repeatable and easy, do that, right? Earn trust and loyalty through your organization in whatever your comfort zone is, but shore up any kind of weakness that you have. Weakness is probably too strong a word, but any kind of product knowledge gap that you have in order to expand your horizons. I mean, it's kind of a cheesy answer, and I get that, but like, it's hard, right? And it's not something that comes to RevOps people or ops people overnight. It's like there's lots of trial and error. There's mistakes that you make along the way, but the more knowledge that you gather over time, the better off, the easier it's going to become in future jobs.
Ryan, what's your perspective there? Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that there's a couple different approaches. I mean, I think one would really be at the simplest level, exporting all of your, like if you're looking to match up data from different sources and you can't write the SQL to go about that, is export the data and really like read through it line by line in a way to really understand where your discrepancies are lying, to start to understand where these things are popping up for you. I've definitely done like manual QAs of data to at least understand, okay, this number is showing this and this number is showing this, like where are the gaps, what opportunities aren't being tracked in each place. And it's painstaking work. But when you find like that one opportunity that was marked in the wrong stage that made this system reported as revenue and this not, you can start to learn from those mistakes in your systems and to Sam's point, build the reporting functionality and capability to catch those moving forward. You're going to find those little mistakes at high volume early on, but if you can build some fidelity around it, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I promise. I think I also love, Sam's point on report where you're comfortable. I think that a lot of people want to jump very quickly to the visualize the data, the stand up the tool, the have everything there. Having the fundamental layer and understanding of your data and how it operates, the tool is only going to be as good as your understanding of the data in the first place. So like, make sure you deeply understand your data so that when you sign the checks and bring on the tools, you can actually derive value from them. The worst thing to do is sign a contract for a tool where you don't understand how it works, and then you have to go to your management team in 6 months and they're saying, why isn't this thing working? Why isn't it showing us what we need to see? And it's because you fundamentally don't understand your data in the first place. So if you're not in a data literacy or like data guru, quote unquote, take your time and go through it and learn how your data works, learn the levels that it is, how the objects are set up, learn the primary keys of each of your tables, as nerdy as that sounds, but understand your data and how it works, and then bring on tools once you're ready to really kind of superpower your understanding that you already have.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Sam, there's a follow-on question embedded in there for you too. But I think what is happening in the market, right, is that as RevOps is coming into a point of maturity, or at least from like an idea into actual human beings and or teams inside of organizations, the responsibility for that team and the practitioners inside of that teams is starting to become apparent, right? You have to become a subject matter expert or a systems expert, or at the very minimum, not a data expert, but just data aware of what happens across marketing systems, primarily marketing automation, sales systems, primarily CRM, and your ERP, or wherever the finance team lives and breathes. And sometimes it's also customer success and product data. And so I think over the next, call it 5 to 10 years, you are going to see a bit of a convergence, or at least some alignment between the RevOps world and the bits and pieces of the data world, the data science world, that are required to do this job effectively. And for what it's worth, I saw the same thing happening with IT practitioners and developers who had to increase their business acumen so that they could deliver on business requirements at the speed at which the business was demanding, right? Like when things got lost in translation, everything got slowed down. So you had a phrase in there, Ryan, that I think is useful. It's like you don't have to become a data guru. You just have to become more data literate to be able to have these conversations so that you can pass requirements along to either a vendor or an internal team so they can build things according to your desired specification. And Sam, on that topic, just curious, like how you think about call it the partner versus resource conversation inside of metadata today.
No, that's a great question. I would add one more to your mix. Not only do you have to become data literate across marketing, across sales, across customer success, across finance, you also have to fundamentally understand business strategy, right? You can't be an order taker to any of the heads of those departments in terms of, even if you're partnering very well, you can't be an order taker. You have to at least understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish and where that falls within the global data architecture that's already been built or needs to be built, so that you're not creating potholes in the future that you're going to step in, or the person that comes behind you or that you're promoting up or whatever the answer is going to step in either. So I think strategy, being able to speak business strategy, is also a critical component to the future of RevOps.
That's awesome insight.
In terms of partnership alignment, like I'm a firm believer that RevOps needs a seat at the table with all the other executives. Maybe it's not with the same level of voting authority today, but certainly it is to understand all of those executive level initiatives and to understand where the work is going to come from and how to partner with those people in order to help them to achieve their desired outcomes.
Yeah, I asked a fun poll question on LinkedIn maybe 2 or 3 weeks back, and it was a bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? What comes first, the RevOps human being inside of an org, RevOps human being and or team and or just like approach and methodology, or go-to-market strategy, right? And it was like alignment on go-to-market strategy in particular. And the results were somewhat surprising. It was a split 50-50, right? Some people view that RevOps is actually responsible for driving, strategic alignment on what's happening in the go-to-market engine. And others who, in all likelihood, have just been in that seat before, where leadership is not aligned and it's impossible to do RevOps effectively if leadership is not aligned, viewed the problem statement differently. But Sam, to your point, if there's one takeaway from like the role of RevOps here, to earn a seat at the table, you have to be able to speak that language and ultimately influence the decisions that are being made relative to go-to-market strategy. And you had some great examples of what that looks like around the customer health score and how you used it to tune ICP earlier today. Wanted to give Sam also an opportunity to talk about what he is prioritizing for the next phase of growth at Metadata. So Sam, you want to take that one?
Sure. No, yeah, I appreciate that. So there's short-term goals and there's long-term goals, right? Short-term goals, it's like we're in hyper growth mode. I want to make sure that the tech stack that we're building isn't too complicated for new hires, right? Everybody likes to throw tools at the problem, and there's data coming out of all of these tools, right? But like, how do I make sure that the new CSMs that we hire, the new SDRs that we hired, the new AEs that we hired.
Oh no, we're losing Sam. Well, we'll give it 10 more seconds, and then Ryan,
yeah, of course,
I'll shift back to you. Okay, well, let's keep on going. And actually, Ryan, there's a question in the queue that I might be interesting for you to take a stab at, given the various experiences that you had, right?
Sure.
So in the world of single source of truth being CRM, either HubSpot or Salesforce, right? Like, how do you think about the trade-offs there? And obviously you are now in a place where the data warehouse is becoming your distributed source of truth, right? But how have you approached that in previous roles?
Yeah, I think that, what I've run into with HubSpot and Salesforce as they operate is, to a lot of Sam's point, Salesforce offers you a lot more complexity in terms of the code that you're writing, a lot more ownership, and a lot more customization. It is a deeper, from what I see, deeper technical tool and ability to write a lot of custom code. It's massively flexible. The trade-off there is with massive flexibility can lead to all of these custom variables and you don't know how they're being calculated. It can lead to a lot more complexity in how your go-to-market team is operating. We have seen our customers be very happy in either HubSpot or Salesforce from an operating perspective, from a CRM. And really the trade-off that they've told us is when we're earlier on in our growth journey and we want to understand, we're not as worried about being super, super customized. We just want to make sure we have the data in the right place that is actionable and easy to use. HubSpot's very valuable in terms of drag and drop flows and flow builders being really pretty straightforward. When you get to more complex needs and processes, that's when Salesforce can come in. But I think the thing to push back on is neither one of these CRMs is going to be this magic pill that's going to solve all your problems. You definitely want to make sure that with either CRM that you're choosing, that it's fitting the needs of your team, that your team's happy and that they're operating effectively, and that you can have access to the data that you need in the right place at the right time. So it's not for me like, you have to go with one or the other. It's really where you are in your team structure, where you are in your headcount, and where you are in your customization and integration needs overall.
I think that's very wise. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a tool out of which comes data and process and customer experience. So yeah, how do you figure out what to optimize for based on where you're at and what your team and customers need? Sam,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to say I loved Sam's point on the limiting tools in your tech stack. I think one of the things that a lot of new sales tech tools are not prioritizing as much is their reporting capability. Like if you go into a lot of the new sales tech tools, you're not seeing as much development on the reporting side. And so bringing on new sales tech tools, while it can seem like an answer, can also add much more reporting complexity to your business. So I would super echo Sam's point on being very critical as you bring on new sales tech tools to make sure you understand how the data works and what reports you're going to get. Reporting is like often skipped in the demo process. It's like not a thing that they're talking about. Here's everything I can do for you. And the reporting functionality is often a second fiddle. And so I would lean in on that more, especially if you're not a data guru or technical wizard in any way.
I want to talk to what Ryan said a little bit is like, even the core platforms, right, that everybody has to have now, like everybody has LinkedIn Sales Nav. I say everybody, but like Sales Nav is a common one. A version of Outreach or Sales Loft is a common one. A version of Gong is a common one. And their reporting in those three platforms isn't terrible, right? But those platforms are wicked expensive on a per seat basis. So I want to know, is the sales rep using it? Is the sales rep using it well? And is it impacting revenue? And you can't do those things in those platforms. You have to bring that data somewhere else and butt it up against opportunities and figure out how to do any kind of attribution of those tools to the opportunities to see, does the sales guy get it? What does our best practice look like? Who are my rock star users? How is it affecting revenue? And so my gut tells me I'm going to wind up building a very similar to product usage is going to be a sales tool usage in Salesforce that is related to the user record, and figure out how to import that data using Synchrony to figure out, what sales tools are actually worth it for the dollar.
For the audience, Sam, can you just help the audience understand why Synchrony might be useful in that regard? Like how you would activate Synchrony to bring data together on, call it a user inside Salesforce?
Sure. So like LinkedIn, Outreach, and Gong, for example, will all export to CSV for their reporting. And then it's very easy to take those CSVs, drop them into a Google Sheet or an S3 bucket, and tell Syncari how to map those fields and or ETL the data, extract, transform, load the data, and push it into Salesforce in whatever format that we want. So from the product usage data standpoint that we talked about earlier, it's the data is exported, Syncari picks it up out of a directory, it transforms the data into the structure that we want, and it pushes it into Salesforce. I'm thinking about running the exact same play with sales tool usage, dropping it all into a directory on a whatever cadence that we want. Syncari listens for the change, picks it up, transforms the data into the format that we want, and pushes it into Salesforce, which in turn updates reports or triggers, or send dashboard to sales VP, your team is doing XYZ, whatever the situation may be.
Yeah, makes sense. And the reason Sam's mentioning CSV files is that we don't provide, pre-built connectivity to something like LinkedIn Sales Nav. We do for something like an Outreach or a Gong today, right? So you'd be able to pull that data in and keep it in sync. We have this thing called our multi-directional sync engine, which literally means you bring everything into Syncari. Syncari operates as the hub, and then we maintain integrity and consistency as that data flows across your tech stack, because state of the art today is a bunch of either one directional or bidirectional syncs into and out of whatever your single source of truth is, that stomp all over one another if you're not controlling for data consistency, integrity, authority, and whatnot. So just wanted to, again, make that clear for everybody. So Ryan, we touched on, well, actually, Sam, you have not had a chance to answer the question that you were answering when you got cut out. So you were discussing how you are prioritizing for the next phase of growth, and you got to the point where you were thinking about the requirements for AEs, CS folks, SDRs, and then we lost you. So
that's cool. My internet out here in the boonies of Texas is awesome.
Yeah.
The next phase of growth, like if we're not talking about just the general table stakes that I think everyone is thinking about, which is like hiring and tool explosion and data explosion, just all of the normal things, table stakes. The other one that I'm cognizant of and I think about towards the future is making sure that my data is set up in such a way that I can either ingest another business or be ingested by another business. So the reason I say that is back in the day, a couple of years ago, 2018, I worked at a company called GetPrime, which was hyper growth mode, and we got acquired by Pluralsight. Yay for successful exit. But Pluralsight had to ingest the GetPrime Salesforce and all of the other tech stacks into their core foundation. And my data was clean. Their data was a publicly traded company, and it had lots of hands in the kitchen. So I'm trying to make sure that if and when this ever happens again, that everybody doesn't have the same problems that we had when that went around.
Mm-hmm. Optimizing quality for any sort of moment of potential system and data chaos, right? Either
correct,
metadata bringing on a whole bunch of new tools and systems that need to be rapidly integrated into the go-to-market process, or the inverse. Again, we're not signaling anything here to the audience, just talking about the myriad opportunities and potentials for organizations these days. All right, well, we got call it 5 minutes left, and then maybe another 5 minutes for Q&A. But Ryan, when you think about advice that you would give to people who are early on this journey, right? Trying to figure out how to get their data aligned so that they can drive better reporting, as an example. Where would you encourage them to focus their time and energy?
Yeah, so the first thing, and the first thing that I did here was really deeply understand your financial plan and what are the metrics you're going to measure in your financial plan, and then how are they being defined, and then what are the kind of entering metrics that lead to those input metrics that lead to those output metrics. So if you're trying to look at, our closed won op model is here's how many ops we need to close one from these different sources, from inbound, outbound, and partnerships. Here's the ASP we're looking for. Here's the different stages of funnel completion each month. We're looking for X created ops, Y demo occurred, Z qualified, what have you. Make sure you, as a RevOps person, very deeply understand what success looks like to your leadership team and to your board, and then make sure you're tracking. That's the place that I would start. If any place to start is, how are we measuring the success of our business against a financial plan, full stop. Any metric that you share with your board, they're going to want to see what is your pacing towards that metric, whether it's ASP, business mix, ops created, what have you. And then I think the second is, what are the input metrics that lead to that output, and what are the assumptions that you made in your process? So if it's demo bookings, is it sales activities, emails, LinkedIn messages, phone calls? Is it traffic to your website? Is it demo booking conversion rate on your website? What have you? But make sure you're laying out the assumptions from a mathematical perspective of, you want to book 200 demos this month. Where are those going to come from? From visits to your website, from outbound dials? What are your expected conversion rates in your model? And then what does that output look like? And then on the deeper funnel kind of customer health side, it really is what are the drivers of churn in your business? What are the drivers of downgrade in your business? That's the third layer. And I think a lot of what I and Sam are both working on is, what are some indicators that you think are potentially predictive of customer health? Is it contract penetration? Is it user login rate? Is it value realization? I think a lot of that stuff people try to be over scientific with when they build a customer health score. Ours is 4 variables right now, and it's very easy for an account manager to digest, look at her book of customers and say, this company has a 75 and this company has a 22. Let me figure out what's going on with the 22. So that's how I would stack rank it. But alignment with your team, with your management team, and alignment on activity and how you're going to measure that activity is massively helpful. We're going to bring on SalesLoft to do a lot of outbound cadencing. Great. How are you going to measure which cadence is better than which one's driving opportunities? Like, the return on that investment is massively important.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. And please, if you have any questions for Ryan on that, drop them into the chat or the question box. Sam, what about you? What advice would you give to the audience?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit in a different direction than what Ryan did. Like, data is the truth, right? Once you have clean data, right, it becomes the gospel. It becomes the truth. But the narrative that you create around that truth can have a lot of downstream effects. And so my advice to RevOps leaders, to anybody that handles data on a consistent basis, is to do so from a place of love, right? It's very easy to build a spreadsheet, to build a report, build a table, and stack rank X, Y, and Z. And the person at the bottom of Z is, all of a sudden in the crosshairs of a lot of questions. So make sure when you are presenting data, you are doing it from a place of compassion and, in general sense, well-being. Like, obviously there's going to be times where the data is bad news, and that's fine. But how you control the narrative and how that's presented can really impact a lot of people's lives. And you can't take that for granted.
Again, very, very wise, Sam. Thank you for sharing that. So we're at 10:50. Thank you, everybody, for joining this, again, very, I think, useful and timely discussion on what's happening within businesses, and in particular, how we are yielding data to great effect to drive more efficient go-to-market strategies. Please let me know and let this audience, or let the speakers know if you have any questions. Now's the time by dropping them into the I guess, ask a question widget, we'll call it that. And we'll go from there. Yeah. There's one question for you, Ryan, that we didn't answer over the flow of the conversation. What did you select as your data warehouse think you said mode for visualization, but what's your data warehouse and why?
We're using Snowflake. We ended up, we're using a tool called Mozart Data that is combining kind of ETL, five-train ETL and Snowflake and Transform, which worked for us at our stage right now. And so that's how we used it. I think it's less the thing I would say is it's less on the warehouse, on the more specific, on the visualization stuff. The tools themselves are very valuable. The thing I would definitely echo is like focus on the data, like making sure you understand your data before worrying, pushing too much on the exact tools themselves, and prepare yourself for a world in which you do a lot more of that preparation and cleanliness for sure.
Yeah, and on that note, before this conversation, we aligned with Sam and Ryan both that if you have questions about these topics and you're trying to develop your strategy here, please reach out to either one of them on LinkedIn. And as a vendor, Synchrony, we think about this problem every day, and we are helping organizations like Metadata drive value and outcomes relative to some of these challenges every day. So please feel free to reach out to me. Check out our website, look for a demo request if that's valuable to you, and this would be timely for you. It's also a no-code platform relative to some of the conversations we've been having here around how much data competency is required. I think what we also have come to understand is that when you're talking about data, right, code isn't necessarily the limiting factor. If you don't know how to write Python, you're not gonna be able to write Python, but the logic around how data needs to move across systems and how that logic rolls up into, the financial plan for the business is ultimately the job of the RevOps professional. And that's where we can create a ton of value for the business. And that's the type of stuff that we're trying to help our customers do. So any other questions for the audience or for the panelists here today? Sam, I got one for you. How in your experience have you thought about ownership of this problem, right? Like at Metadata, ownership was yours. You came in and you effectively had a platform to drive change here. Has that been consistent in your experience? And if not, why?
No, it's definitely not been consistent. Obviously, data ownership by committee is certainly a thing. But in the absence of making a decision, I am very comfortable with making decisions and or asking for forgiveness permission later, depending upon the situation. But I also know who I am and what I'm good at. And I thrive in small businesses where they need somebody that is willing to come in and get dirty and make those decisions, right? I'm not meant for situations that are decision by committee. And that's part of my evaluation process when I go interview, right? But and I'm not interviewing like anybody from Metadata, just relax. I'm just saying that I know who I am and I know where I'm good. And I use that strength when I go look for opportunities that make sense for me, right? But I think the answer to your general question is can you do this with a committee? Yes, absolutely. You can do it with a committee. If we use the term that you used earlier is I am absolutely a data dictator, and I make no qualms about that. I'm not the one to tell you what your priorities are, but when it comes to how the data is architected, that's my call, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, makes sense. And Ryan, curious to get your perspective here. I mean, you happen to have a background, right, in data. So how do you think about ownership here?
Yeah, I think the ownership does fall on our team. I think it's probably less the intention and more of just the interest and the passion for data analysis overall. I think one thing that is really interesting, you talked a little bit about this, which I liked, Aaron, about the how data analytics and kind of data science will potentially roll into a RevOps capacity at SaaS businesses. And I definitely see a lot of that move. I think what is interesting is as you're thinking about your team, one of the things where I'm thinking about the growth plan for my team, and one of the things I'm thinking about right now is I have people on my team who are very good technical operators within software systems, who are good at connecting pipes, who are good at building scalable processes, who I consider much more ops minded. And then there are people who find themselves to be much more analytically minded, building storytelling to Sam's point, building dashboards, like much more in the data. And I think early on, people are going to be doing both and playing in both parameters. But as I've seen with some larger companies that I've worked at, over time, you may have people who are much more ops focused and much more analytics focused within a RevOps capacity. I think the importance there to keep an eye out for as your team grows is making sure that even if the ops people aren't building the dashboards or writing the SQL or whatever, that they understand how the data is getting from the systems that they're implementing into the dashboards and the reporting. Because I think over time, you get to a point where you have like a data analytics team with analysts and analytics engineers and what have you. And the concern is that if you don't have the proper translation from what the tools are and what the data is to just handing a bunch of exports to an analytics team with no context, like you run into some real problems. And so I think for orgs that are growing, for people to keep a really close eye on, if you're not the data guru, we're circling back to this, but if you're not the data guru, you still have to understand fundamentally how the data is set up and how it works, because then you're going to hand an analytics team, they're going to build some slides for your board and it's not going to make any sense. And you're going to say, oh, this is wrong. You didn't check these 3 filters or whatever. And I've run into that issue before, and it's everybody's embarrassed, I would say.
Yeah. Somebody's got to be that translation layer, right? Whether it's the data team or the revenue team or somebody in the middle, like somebody's got to do that translation. It's so apparent. Well, we will end the panel discussion there. Thanks to Pavilion for having us today, and thank you so much to Ryan and Sam again for engaging with us in this, again, provocative discussion. I think it's just a fun time. 1, to be in revenue operations, 2, to be in high growth SaaS companies, and 3, to be focusing on the data domain, because we are going to unlock so much value as we start to crack this code on getting data to the people and systems that need it. So again, thanks both so much. We'll see y'all next time.
Thank you.
Bye.